Hey everyone, and hey Jeremy.
Hey, Peter.
How you doing?
A little bit under the weather, but I'm all right.
Good. And welcome to the Retrospective to everyone who's tuning in. I'm Peter, and joining me is my regular partner, Jeremy. We're both engineering leaders with a lot of experience, and we figured we are going to share these experiences on our respective blogs and newsletters. And then we launched this weekly podcast to discuss our recent articles because we believe this conversation can lead to, deeper and more valuable content. So welcome, and let's get on with this week's show.
Yeah, and thank you to all of our loyal listeners who tune in and give us great feedback. We're really definitely at the friends stage, so thanks for being a
Yeah,
friend and supporting us at this kind of raw early stage.
indeed.
Well, Peter, now we're coming to the end of an epic series of yours.
Oh yeah. Longer than I thought it's going to take.
I definitely got that, but as went further and further into the series, so you've been writing about getting hired as an engineering manager, and this week's is obviously one of the most positive parts of getting hired, closing the offer.
Yeah.
So I'd love for you to sort of walk us through a little bit the article, and we're going to just probably talk about different bits of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I think if I have to summarize the advice in this part is that let me step back a bit. During the interviews, during the application, during the whole process, if I'm interviewing, I'm really working towards getting an offer. So it's very tempting that when that moment comes and I get the phone call or the email and I get the offer, I'm so relieved. I'm so happy. I'm just immediately jump on accepting it. And the main reason about writing this article was pointing it out that that might not be the best strategy. I mean, congratulations that you got the offer, but you're very subjective. You're in a very emotional state. You work towards really hard towards getting this offer. Give it a little bit more time, give it a little bit more thought, and see what else you might be able to fit in or adjust in the offer. That was one of the reasons why I thought it's important to write about this topic. And the other one is to give some advices about what to do in the fortunate case if somebody has multiple offers and how to navigate that. Go
I was
on.
going to say there's like in this, I think that's just don't rush it. Like the key message: don't rush into
Exactly.
things.
Yeah.
I guess our audience are engineering managers. They're probably less likely to be rushing into things, probably coming from slightly more analytical background. But
Hopefully.
well, a lot. But one thing I would say on that though is there's also this thing. I think the other cause why people might rush to say yes is because you could be in a situation where you're desperate to get out of where you are,
Yes.
and
Yes. Or
that's what's
desperate to find an income because you haven't had the job
even
since months.
even tougher
Yeah.
situation to be in. Yeah, so those are those can really trigger you to jump on something before fully thinking it through.
Yeah. That's a good aspect what you're saying. When I was giving the intro, I was thinking about ways you can negotiate, ways you can fit in a little bit more, make it a bit more comfortable. But actually, yeah, the first decision you need to make is that, is this offer for me? Like, I know that I put on my fighting face and enthusiastic face during the interviews, but now those are over. I have an offer in front of me. Do I want to do this, or do I want to keep on searching, or stay where I am, or just refuse the offer? So that was actually the first point in the article about validating the offer, and this is where I go back to the first part of the series, where I advise to collect somebody's preferences. What are you looking for in a new job? What are the aspects that are very important for you? What are not so important? And hopefully, when you started like that, you already have a table where you listed your preferences with some scores. It's really easy to just take the offer and continue with that table and try to get a more objective look at the offer that's in front of you. Because again, realizing that your judgment is not very objective in this state is the necessary first step to be able to make a good decision on. Fair.
Yeah, I love how throughout this series you've you've had a bit of everything's been connected together, whether it's kicking off your job search and having the preferences and turning that into the scoring at this stage, or thinking about the stories and how you're going to present yourself and data points for the interview stage that you're embedding within your CV and how you put your CV together. I did like how you connected everything together in the
Mm.
series. So yeah, and I think like this preferences thing is super important. Honestly, the one, and I know you kind of mention it here, but for me, like it's often come down to, even though like I don't know, like there's a gut feel to all of this too. There's sometimes an element of the scoring that
Sure.
you can't put a number on. You can't. Why is it? What is it about this company that's attracting me, and so on. And I think that there's two ways to that. One is in a very positive sense of, oh, actually, you know what? Maybe not entirely perfect, but I have really great feeling about the team and whatever. And there's the other, which is that you're just over excited about something, and maybe there are some red flags that you overlook in all of it. So one thing I will say is, my partner Claire has always had the right premonition about many of the the situations I've been in, and sometimes we've gone against that, and later it comes out that there was something that she sensed about it. And so I would say, in all the conversations that you have, definitely, you're also not just doing this on your own, and so the friendships that you have around you are really important, and it's your decision. You got to take it. I will say, even in those situations, my personal situations where I've maybe in retrospect thought, oh, the premonition was wrong, I still wouldn't change it now because I learned a lot from it, and part of who I am now, right? Those jobs and the experience and people I worked with. And frankly, you can't change it. So you've got to move on. But yeah, it's
Yeah. Two things. This is super valuable what you're just saying, and I wish I would have heard it before writing the article, because having a partner or a very good friend, a mentor, someone who you can discuss this whole thing, it forces you to articulate it well when you're explaining to someone. It forces you to think through why are you excited about this job? What are the, as you said, little red flags, and just have a validation, someone who you can work with. I don't think you can replace that with ChatGPT.
no,
That would be an interesting experiment,
no,
but no, I'm in all seriousness, yeah, I think it's a very good advice
yeah,
to find someone, say that, look, I need half an hour of your time. I have this offer in front of me. Actually, I did the same when I accepted. I had two offers to choose from before going to Dashlane, and I asked a few people I trust their opinion. And what I really liked is that they were not part of my process, so they just knew that I'm looking for a job, but didn't know anything else. And it was so interesting to hear them, that what I thought is a hard decision was a very obvious decision for them. Like, Peter, the way you explain it, you need to go with Dashlane. Like
exactly.
that, there is no question.
Your friends hear
And
you
then,
and they know there's a difference when you describe the two jobs.
yes,
Yeah,
yes, and yeah. To be honest, the Dashlane offer was a bit more challenging on paper. It was a higher title. So I guess my big question was like, do I want the bigger challenge and the bigger learnings and the bigger everything, or do I stay in the safety zone and everyone encouraged me to do the right decision?
well, Peter, you were
I'm
probably
grateful.
overqualified for the
Yeah,
Dashlane job as well, but
yeah. In some sense maybe, but in some sense I learned a lot. So I'm very grateful for the 2 years.
yeah, me too. Great company, great experience, great people.
Indeed. Yeah.
I think your point about this is a very
I know.
interesting point. It's actually reminded me of the quote I put in my newsletter this week. But basically, putting it in writing or putting your thoughts together in a logical way to explain to someone else
Yeah.
is very important because it helps you gather your thoughts. So
Yeah. I mean,
talk
that's
to your
that's the
parents
whole
if
reason
that's all
I'm
you have, right? Just talk to your parents.
or I don't know, stand in front of a mirror and explain it to yourself. I hope nobody's in that situation, but yeah, like having to articulate yourself. And we will talk about your newsletter a bit later, but it resonated with me a lot. Like this is the reason I wrote this series also, because I wanted to learn about. I did this whole getting hired stuff before, very, based on gut feelings and stuff I read here and there in discussion. Having to organize my thoughts about it, putting a structure around it, and standing behind it, it forced me to learn a lot about this, and yeah, I'm wiser at the end of the process. I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, exactly.
I remember the other thing that I wanted to react to is about this whole gut feeling thing that you mentioned and making a decision. I think there's an important aspect, and actually you brought it up in our last podcast, that once you make your decision, accept and move on. Don't let it eat you up from inside that, maybe I shouldn't have taken this offer, or maybe I should have taken that offer that I refused. And a way that helps me do this is just recognizing that, yes, I made the best possible decision based on the available information at that time. Maybe there was something that was not available for me, or I didn't know, or I made a bad judgment. Sure, but the decision was made. Let's move on.
Yeah. And frankly, we're talking here for an audience this is a podcast, and this series is for engineers, engineering managers, and I would say here that you're one of very few privileged people on this planet who has an amazing skill set, and it might feel kind of dire and difficult if you feel like you've taken a wrong decision later on or whatever. But really, the worst that can happen is not that bad. Even in this current kind of job climate that this article is written in, and all the rest, I frankly, I think we might forget the level of privilege we have. And so I would just say, you will bounce back if it goes. There will be a way to bounce back from all of this. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I like is this very thumb rule or judgment decision helper is that I'm trying to portray myself in the future, and I'm thinking, what would I like to regret? Not accepting the offer, or accepting the offer.
Exactly.
And this aspect of not thinking about what I would enjoy, but what I would like, how I would feel if I would regret accepting the offer, or how I would feel if I would regret not accepting the offer. That helps me decide. This was also a great help in 2 years, 3 years ago when I accepted this offer. That shit, I don't want to regret not accepting this offer. This is a great challenge. I need to go with it.
And it's this optionality you create for your future self. And sometimes where some of these things can feel like a risk. And I guess right now what we're talking about is, I have an offer. How do I think through everything to get to the point whether I know I want to take it or not, right? And I really do think that kind of looking back, will I really regret this, or would I regret not taking the job? Is one great way, and the other is, sometimes depending on the stage of your career and where you are, you need to optimize for different things, and sometimes it's optimizing, and especially early in your career, it's optimizing for experience. And even if you end up in maybe a startup that goes bust or whatever, and you took a risk and it was a great product, you liked it, and then suddenly it goes down, I can tell you, if you're in that kind of a scenario, you probably will have made great friends with all the people that went through it with you, and you'll have learned a lot and have take something even better forward into the future. So nothing is really, it's like, I do think that thinking through of what how the future self, how it helps you in your future self is an important part of it.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring up the busted startup. I just had a good chat with a startup founder the other day, last week, and his startup was not a success. At one point, I think he was like a team of 15, 20 people, so it grew quite, but now there's a good chance that it's not going anywhere. So he's considering looking for some engineering manager positions, and I needed to tell him that this super valuable experience, like If I would be the hiring manager, I would love that, especially if it's a strongly product-focused company or a startup. Having this experience, going through this founding phase and all the day-to-day struggles, I'm pretty sure that that guy has better prioritization skills than any of us do, because he was the product person also. Like, he needed to really decide what to work on in order to ensure the company survives the next week.
Well, I had exactly that experience when we started the company we did in Cameroon, and we created a startup incubator and a co-working space like that. That kind of 2-year experience of doing that was worth 7 years of my job
Totally.
before.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously, if you're a few years from retirement and you're thinking about it, probably a different equation. And I think that's it. Is also this equation of, if you're in a job, and maybe I think like so I worked for a manager once who said to me, Jeremy, you should be interviewing at least once a year. And then you'll know if you really want to stay here, and you'll know if this is a job that you really want to do, and you also know what your worth is in the market in terms of salary. And so I think like it is a valid option to get to this stage and to say no and to stay in your current job too. And despite the fact that you might be in a company where there's, especially in the current climate where there's been a bunch of return to offices, a lot of pressure on execution, a lot of quite tough decisions taken by CEOs, often in the best interest of the company, pretty much always in the best interest of the shareholders, right? And I would say not always easiest to swallow for the staff, but maybe actually when you look at it in a cold hard light or mirror of an offer from somewhere else, maybe what you have is actually really good. Maybe you have some special terms, some special affordances and all the rest that you won't have. And so I think it can also really be a positive thing to be able to say no to an offer, but also then maybe make you more energized for the job you have.
Yeah, no, totally. I have a friend, he's a developer, longtime friend, and that's one of his philosophy. Like, wherever he's working, whenever he's working, he's 24/7 interviewing. I mean, not every day, but he applies sometimes to some jobs. He said that helps him keep smart, like he enjoys the actual challenge of interviewing, of figuring a company out, of doing the technical test in a totally different stack in with different people. And then all the values you mentioned, like get a realistic, immediate feedback about your worth on the market. See how other companies could look like. Obviously, they are showing their best face to you, so it can be tempting. But as you said, maybe at the end of an interview process, you will get a strong validation that where you actually are is not as bad as it seemed months ago. Or
the doom and
few
gloom
weeks
that
ago.
you feel and can be fed by the coffee machine chat or the after work drink or whatever, or the the memes in Slack, or I don't know what, that can kind of end up sometimes being a bit of a downward spiral, might prove might not so bad. But
but this actually, it connects to this feeling that there are a lot of good stuff at companies that people just take for granted. Usually these are technical areas also, and that can come up in an interviewing. For example, maybe you go to interview somewhere and you figure out that, oh my God, our CI/CD processes are so much more better than these companies, and I didn't realize that our local development environment is so smooth and we have so many helper tools here. Of course, I complain about flaky tests because they happen, but it's nothing compared to this company I just interviewed at.
I would have to start from
a lot
zero
of
again.
It happens a lot. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But that can be the challenge you're looking for too. So
true, and then you can have a say in it.
Yeah. So Peter, okay, so I have an offer. I'm weighing it. I've decided I want to go for it. Talk me through the negotiation and what your advice is around the negotiation.
It's it's a different climate, and this is coming up in every part of this article series probably. Because my advice 1 year ago, 2 years ago would have been that you have a gut feeling how much the company was excited about you. You see your offer, you know how much of a range you said in the first recruiter call. Try to negotiate a higher compensation. Like it might sound brutal, but companies kind of expected it also. There was a big competition between applicants, and they were happy that they found someone who they wanted to work with, sent an offer. It was an offer. Do a negotiation, add 5% more. I don't know, negotiate a sign-up bonus, something. Now, big disclaimer that in this climate, there's a risk that this could result in a lost offer. There's a good chance, as I explained in the series, that there are others in the pipeline at the similar stage. Maybe somebody's right behind
You have
you
a
if
number
you're
two choice
refusing the
behind
offer.
you,
Yeah,
and if you don't take it, they are ready to offer the other. I would say though, I mean,
exactly. Yeah,
I think the key thing here is to it's a subtle negotiation, because I think you should, in some ways, you need to ask. It's how you negotiate, but you can't drag on the process. I think that generally a company that you'd want to work for is not going to just explode the offer on you, right? I mean, and if they were, then maybe
I mean,
that kind
today
of
I can
practice.
imagine everything, but yeah,
Yeah, but if they're doing that kind of practice, like they give you the
yeah,
offer,
yeah, it should
the
be.
most likely thing they're going to do is come back to you very quickly and say, no, we can't do anything more. Will you, based on what you know, is this something you want or not? And ideally, they are tell you very clearly why. We do have another candidate that we are our first choice or whatever, but we would like you to,
Yeah.
and obviously some don't, but you have to understand why there's a pressure sometimes on the timeline.
Exactly. I mean, and this is key. Like you have to understand the context of the company. All the interviews, every little gut feeling you picked up during the talks will help you decide how much you can push this. And the other thing that's important is hopefully you built a good relationship with the recruiter at the company. Work together with that person. Like don't go back that I'm only accepting 120,000 per year. That would be a very bad signal. But if you say that, oh my God, I'm so excited. The company looked really good. I had a lot of good talks. I see the technical challenges. They are awesome. I think I could contribute really. The only problem is that in order to continue with my financial plans and support the family and everything, you can come up with reasons. I need 110,000 per year. I realize this is 5% more than what you were offering or 10% more or whatever. I'm reaching out to you first to discuss if there is something we could do about it because I'm really excited about this opportunity. Something like this, a reach out like this to a recruiter, asking to jump on a call. Don't do everything in an email because it's much easier to interpret emotions through a call. And then you will see. And then if you start like this, there's a way to go back. Because if you start with, I'm not accepting this offer only if you give me 10% more, it's really hard to say that, you know what, actually I accepted because you called my bluff. And
Yeah. I will make a book recommendation at this point. The book is called
I know it's on.
Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss, who's a kind of a FBI hostage negotiator. And I really like one of the things that he says in there. So he talks about mirroring and empathy. And I think that that's something that you already covered in building the relationship with the recruiter. And as you say, we're all incentivized on the same thing, right? And especially if you're the first choice, the recruiter's incentivized to get you over the line as quick as possible in for the team. And what Chris Voss says is really just make them solve your problem. Like instead of saying, I'm not going to, I need 10% more, explain why. Or tell them, if you have some special requirement around like whether it's remote work or travel or whatever, if let's say you live in a tiny 1-bedroom flat and you're talking about like having some co-working space because the job is fully remote, or you're living really far away from where they are and the travel expenses or whatever, and just like explain out your problem and say, help me solve this problem, and put the problem.
Exactly. Yeah.
Don't fight them, but give them the problem, make them solve the problem. And he gives great advice about the language to use and the way to do that. But I would definitely, this is negotiation for sure. You should negotiate. And I can tell you that if you leave stuff on the table that you don't even try to negotiate, you'll feel worse than if you try and negotiate and you don't get it.
Yeah. I mean, it depends on how you set it up, because if you set it up like this, like a problem to solve together, maybe the solution is going to be a compromise. Most of the time it's going to be a compromise. But even if there is zero movement from this, if you set it up like this, then uh, you don't feel so bad.
Yeah.
And the other thing you mentioned briefly is that negotiation is not just about compensation. Maybe there are other aspects that are important to you. And I list a few examples in the article. But if you take out your preferences list from the first day when you started this process, then maybe you find something, and those can help you also put something in if they cannot increase the compensation.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, and I think that for the majority of us, the non-salary parts of the job are maybe, we get a certain amount of salary, and suddenly the other non-monetary parts are worth a lot more. Whether that's the sort of work-life flexibility, might be that you're I don't know. I mean, you might be. I mean, I had the experience where I had someone negotiate to do a 4-day work week with me when I gave them the offer, and I said yes. By the way, that's one of the things that I think that keeps them still where they are. Many. I've actually. It's not the only time I've done that for someone, and neither of those people have left the company that they work for, that gave them that.
Yeah, no, that
well
can
beyond the average
one other
tenure, right?
long discussion.
Yeah.
My only concern about this kind of work-life balance aspect, it's hard to give. Like, if the company has a strong in-office presence culture, you're not gonna have a big chance of negotiating a work from
You'll
home setup.
know by asking the recruiter the simple question: is this a point that we can negotiate on or not?
Yeah.
They're your
And
friends.
that's also a reason why you should work with the
Exactly.
recruiter.
Yeah. And by the way, there's sometimes you might be in a situation where you're behind two recruiters, where there's like a recruiter that is working externally with an internal recruiter or an internal HR person.
Mhm. Yeah.
Obviously, they are super incentivized to place you because they get paid a
Oh, yeah.
commission, and if
Yeah.
someone else places someone, they get. But so they are so that's an important relationship. But I still think like you can't just have them being the only go-between for you, and like make sure you build enough of a relationship with the HR person in the company so that you can have that conversation. I think it's really important.
No, I agree. That's a good advice. I didn't think of that aspect, but yeah, if an external recruiter is pushing you to the company, then from the company's point of view, that recruiter and you are the same unknown person, almost, like a little bit more, because they might have some relationship with this recruiter before, but they are not employed by the company. Their incentives are very different. They are not incentivized by the long-term success of the company.
Yeah,
So,
and frankly, they're incentivized to place you above anyone
regardless.
else.
Yeah.
Which means that in some of these negotiations where they feel like it might be risky to place you, they'll maybe back away from the risk of getting in that conversation.
I see. Yeah. It's a good point. Yeah. So yeah, either way, build a relationship with the in-house recruiter, or if it's a smaller company or a company without an in-house recruiter, then the hiring manager.
And maybe less likely to scenario to happen these days, Peter, but what do I do if I have multiple offers?
Well, congratulations. I guess what's also important is that you played your cards very well if you have multiple offers at the same time. The first challenge is usually that you have an offer and you still have some ongoing processes at other companies. So in this case, I would, cause the first question is, what do I tell to the first offer? And in the previous part, I gave some advice about how to buy some time to explain that you need a little bit more time to think through. But, I strongly believe in transparency. So I don't like haven't advised people to play games and try to come up with fake ideas. No, just share with the recruiter. I'm excited about the company, but there's another exciting company that I really want to make a, you know, well thought through long-term decision in this important question. I'm not going to your company or the other company for 6 months. I'm planning to spend there years. I owe it to myself and to you also to see all the offers and make the best decision I can. So I ask you a little bit of flexibility. Give me 1 more week. I don't know till I can wrap up the other process and then talk with the other recruiter saying the same, that I know I'm just past the, I don't know, hiring manager interview. I still have 4 rounds to go. Can you do anything to make it a little bit faster? I can be super flexible, take evening calls, whatever, because I already received an offer. It's tempting, but I'm really excited about your company also, and I would love to go through the process to see and be able to decide. So be transparent and work something out.
Yeah, there's a couple thoughts I have on this. One is, if you have the offer from what feels like the better job for you, don't string on the other, like, don't do a false
Fair?
thing. Like, go with your heart on this. Like, don't, any games you play will never work for you. You know, don't play people against each other for the sake of it.
Oh no, yeah.
You know, like, but yeah, at the same time, if you, what I think you gave really good advice here is, if you're in multiple processes at the same time, be transparent that you've applied for other jobs. It's in your best interest to let the recruiter from the company know if you're progressing in particularly faster in one or other, because they will try and match you. They'll be trying to hook you too. And usually, if you're in that situation, it's actually in your favor, because, I don't know, scarcity or the demand creates some
Oh
kind of
yeah,
pull
totally.
anyway.
Yeah,
It's in your
yeah,
favor
yeah.
actually to do that. So, definitely try and advance them towards a similar timed conclusion if you happen to be in the same
Yeah,
time.
yeah. And it's
Yeah.
it's hard to stay excited about different companies. Don't stretch yourself too thin.
Yeah.
Like you really don't need to get a third offer when you already have two, unless those two are really bad. And yeah, what you said, it's also important that maybe the first, you're in 3, 4 processes, but the first offer you got, that's actually very close to your heart, and you're pretty confident that you would choose that. Then just accept it and pull out of the other
Yeah.
processes.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
fine.
Yeah, and I think going back to the point you made in the previous, you know, about, I think the environment we're in, it's not like, this may be a fairly rare thing, but if you happen to be fortunate and, you know, you have some particular skills, or you're just very fortunate, yeah, it's I think the integrity of how you approach it is super important. And but do bear in mind that you may not still be able to negotiate more because of it. The budget still might not be the case. So the timing again is
Yeah.
it's actually really hard. There's a lot of pressure. I think when we say this, I know that people hearing it, they have an offer, are going to feel under a lot of pressure because of what we're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and I really didn't want this to sound like you're leaving something on the table if you don't negotiate. I did, or don't accept immediately under any circumstance. No, it's perfectly fine if you feel like that. It's just, be aware that you're biased at this state of mind, and maybe you say that, okay, yeah, sure, I'm biased, but whatever, I really need this job, so I accept it, and then good for you.
Exactly. Okay,
Yeah,
so I've accepted the job. What do
congrats.
I do now?
Well, quit if you still have a job.
Oh, well,
The,
hold your horses. Don't just
yeah,
quit.
yeah.
Don't go in and rip up the paper and say, I'm out, bitches, you know?
Oh yeah. Like, I mean, you should have a written offer and everything, but
Ideally, I mean, in my view, get it, you know, depends on the country, but sign a contract.
yeah, but I know that's the advice, and I agree. But on the other hand, he, especially in these countries where it has a binding force, there's also a lot of labor laws that allows someone to be fired during the trial period without any justification, Even if you have a written contract, you start, maybe on your start day, they will say, I'm sorry, we have a big layoff.
Oh yeah,
You're going to let go. So all I'm saying is that, yes, please don't make the mistake of quitting before being 110% sure that this is a
yeah. My
valid
point
job
was
offer.
more the make sure that make sure the offer is not going to drop, because like
Yeah,
we hear the stories now. I think it's mainly in America, but we hear the
yeah,
stories of
oh
like
yeah,
offers being rescinded
yeah,
after the fact of like an acceptance, right? So
yeah. It happened, or even maybe you have a phone call from the hiring manager saying that we're going to send you an offer in 2 days. Just our legal department, I don't know, finance needs to check it. But I'm telling you now, it's going to be this much money. These are the, etc. You have everything in an email. You love it. You want to accept it. You can even say that this sounds, oh, great. Just say, I'm waiting for the email, and then we can confirm. And don't do anything without having at least an email
yeah,
offer.
and actually that's an important part of, I think, the closing out the offer part is in the negotiation, as I think, as you say here very clearly, if there are things that you did negotiate, make sure you also get those in writing, especially if they're
Yes.
non-monetary things that are not in your contract and so on.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, there are countries like in France where it's super important if you're allowed to do remote work or you're required to go to the office by the contract. Like different rules can apply to you. So if you accept the offer and they send you a contract that doesn't have a remote work optionality that you discussed during the call, be polite. It was probably a mistake. Don't never assume bad intent, but be insisting that you really need this in the contract because you discussed it and you need to rely on it. Maybe it's easier to imagine that maybe something happens and by the time you start, maybe your hiring manager is going to be a different person. How do you want to start your work relationship? Explaining that person that, oh, by the way, the person who interviewed me promised me I can do this. Yeah, okay, show me where is it, because we don't do this at this company. And then
yeah.
what can you do?
Get it in writing. Don't I mean, it may not be worth much in your jurisdiction. It may be worth something, but hopefully,
Cannot hurt.
I think ethics and character are some of the most important things that we take with us everywhere. I think for companies, it's the same.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that most like companies that are worth anything will honor to whatever extent that they can, and sometimes they can't. But ideally, if that person has emailed you with the people, the HR team, in copy, and
Yeah.
so on and so forth, that's kind of like an engagement from the company's perspective to honor something with you, regardless of who wrote the message.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I think, and in this sense, I think emails are perfectly fine. Like you don't need to have a signed document, did offer.
Yeah. Well, I will say,
Yeah,
like, if it's you discuss a remote contract and you receive a contract that is not a remote contract,
that's a
that's
different question.
yeah,
But
all the
yeah,
fuzzy
what I'm
stuff.
trying to say is that maybe an email in your jurisdiction doesn't have a legally binding value, but it shows the intent black or white. It rules out any kind of misunderstanding or
Exactly.
miscommunication.
Yeah.
And the person who wrote the email, you have no reason to assume that they're not going to stand by their word.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'm okay.
Okay,
So now,
can we quit now?
I'm happy. Yeah, you can quit now.
Yeah. So it's if you're quitting on bad terms and you're leaving the company because you really have enough of your manager or strategy or whatever, still this is the moment when you should just take the high road and you need to understand that the first priority of what you should have is to make this departure as smooth for everyone as possible. Like there is no reason to bring up fights. There is no reason to say, I told you I'm gonna quit if you don't get me that bone. Whatever. Just call a one-on-one with your manager, explain that you're quitting, explain why, what are the timelines, and be professional and just discuss the details.
Make it factual. Know then the official resignation process.
Oh yeah,
Sometimes that's
definitely.
an
Like
email. Sometimes you actually have to send a recorded letter. And just for people who may, I mean, like, you just understand it, because like in one job I quit in France, I had to get the HR department to stamp it and sign it.
Yeah, when
That
they
was their
received it.
process that they
Yeah,
received it in a same country. An email was sufficient. So
yeah.
like
But this is also ties to my point. Like your first interaction with the company should be with your manager, where you explain the situation and you can ask for the help.
yeah,
Okay, what are the exact processes? And
yeah.
if they are not cooperating, then go to HR, and ask them about what needs to happen. But they're motivated also to make this one.
I would say that you made a very important point there. Your first contact should be with your manager, and like even if you don't have the greatest relationship with them, the worst thing can be that you tell everybody else in the company before you actually
No, no, don't do
officially
that.
do that. Now, it might be that some of your friends who advised you in this work in the same company, but they really need to be sworn to secrecy and keep things under their hats, because you really it's the worst thing you can do to a manager or to a company is have like something coming out,
Yeah,
and
like I
rumors
mean,
like that
how?
travel very fast.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And this is what if you do like this and just tell at lunch to your friends at the company that, oh, by the way, I have an offer, I'm not here next week or in a month or something. What you're doing is you're really screwing them. Like, because this kind of rumors are eroding the culture of the company, and those people who you just said this, they are staying. You're leaving, they need to stay with the mess, whatever that is at the company. And by spreading these rumors, by removing the means of your manager to handle the situation as well as they think it could be handled, you're just making the situation worse at the company and for everyone working there.
Yeah. When a manager's leaving, I think that whole explanation to then the team and going out beyond, um, I think is important, and I think there needs to be an some level of high level talking points, especially for a manager. And I would say that that's something that you should work with your manager on. Um, and frankly, if nothing, have nothing nice to say about where you work, uh,
Just thought,
don't say anything, or just keep it, like, oh, I just say like, I wanted a new challenge, or the technology stack really interesting for me, or whatever. Like, make something a little bit less
yeah,
controversial. Now, obviously, people who know you well in the company, they're going to know that, and there's no denying that, because you're going to have friends in the company and so on. But um, I think the main point that you're making, that I'm trying to make, that I'm making in this, is don't burn your bridges, and be leave in just find a way to decouple yourself from the company without like you know throwing the furniture around and kicking the cat.
yeah. I mean,
Like,
it's a really hard situation because you worked hard to convince yourself that you need to leave this company. Of course, everything that pushes you out of the company is going to feel stronger, and you're tempted to share it with people when you're explaining why you're leaving. Resist that temptation, and
yeah, I'd say,
or just stay very objective. Like if you cannot, and if it's obviously you're leaving because of the new CEO or something, you can just say something like that. Leadership is taking a direction that you cannot identify with, and just don't go too much
yeah, just
into
to go into
detail.
detail. Obviously, if you have an inner circle of really good friends, feel free. I think just I think you should be able to talk with your inner circle of friends, but you
Yeah, but
there's a fine line there, because it gets telegraphed outwards, and so and like, I think, uh, well, this is why companies have waves of people leaving, right?
yeah,
Um, but and I don't and we're not asking someone to make stuff up, or like, especially in a
no,
particularly toxic company, to just really um say nothing at all. But there's a fine line, and you'll know if you're crossing it and how you feel, and that maybe but what I think the advice that I would like to say here is that might be too late when you feel like it. So just try and temper yourself before it comes out.
Yeah, like what you said earlier is have some objective points where you're leaving, and this can be, maybe it has nothing to do with the company, maybe it's a new challenge, maybe it's a more remote friendly job, maybe it's I don't know, a company that's close to your kids' school, so you can pick them up. I don't know. There can be millions of reasons. Yeah, my point is that have some explanation. The reason it's really hard is because as a manager, you build a strong trust with your team, and it's a betrayal that you're
You
leaving
made
them there, or it can
promises.
be perceived as a
You
betrayal.
made promises.
You made promises, you encouraged them when they fell down, you showed the positive side of everything, and then all of a sudden you just say, okay, there is this saying that the captain leaves the sinking ship the last. You're doing the opposite. The ship might not even be sinking, but you're leaving it. So when you're leaving, you need to be very clear in that your motivations were your personal motivations, and their motivations of staying are a total different question. That's a different equation. There, there are a lot of cases when I left companies when I could say honestly to people that the decision I made is right for me, but I think if you ask me, the right decision for you is to stay because you still have a lot to learn here. There is a great tech stack, or you have very supportive colleagues. You have a team that has a very good roadmap. I don't know. There can be a lot of reasons. Don't fall into this trap to say that this is a horrible company and I'm leaving because it's gonna go broke anyway next month, and because
and it probably
yeah,
won't go
that
bankrupt
would be a
next month anyway.
betrayal.
So, don't just say it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And see, I think the other advice that you give is just how to tell your team, right?
Yeah, yeah. And that's, I think that should be obvious. Like if you have a good trust-based relationship, then you just have a one-on-one with everyone, ideally as fast as you can, because even if you ask the person and you trust them, there's a good chance they're gonna tell someone that, oh, by the way, Peter is leaving. So try to schedule them for a day or two, back to back, whatever, and just tell them that your decision timeline. Uh, the reason for a one-on-one is also because they might be like this gives them a space to react naturally and not need to control their reactions so much, or not cause a scene if they cannot control their reaction. Hopefully you had a good reaction with them, so they're going to be upset. And what you should focus on in this discussion is them. Like answer them even on this discussion is what you're going to do that they can remain successful at the company. Who are going to be their successor? If you don't know them, what will you do to figure that out? What are the things that you're handing over to the next manager? Be explicit that I know we are working towards this promotion. I will put it in writing that this is my assessment of you, and then you can take it to the next manager. I will personally give it to the next manager. So
Exactly.
this discussion is not about you. Like obviously it's about you because you're leaving, but everything else should be about the other
But
person.
as soon as you've resigned and you give that news, the reality is that the concerns of that person really transfer to themselves and not, and that's why it needs to be about them, which is why you need to have the talking points. It might be why that you can't tell your team immediately after you've actually resigned because there's a period of working out who is your successor or what the company will do, and all
Yeah,
of those things, so that you might have to just respect. I mean, in some countries that there's not a lot of notice period and boom, you're out. In other countries, it's quite long, and you may, like for example, in France and other parts of Europe, there's a 3 month notice. It's quite standard. In some places, it can even be longer. So you may, you may have a very long or short transition, and so figuring all of that out, and then having an appropriate sort of timeline to tell your team is very, very important.
yes. The other thing is that the way I said that you cannot really trust your team members because they are spreading rumors, the same is true to your manager also. And it's really a betrayal if somebody on your team hears it from someone else that their manager is leaving. So my advice would be, or what I would do personally, even if I don't know the details, I don't know who's going to be their next manager. Maybe I don't even know my last date. I would still have the call as soon as possible
Yeah.
and just be transparent about all the unknowns and commit to figuring them out before I leave.
Yeah.
Because the alternative has a big risk of them figuring it out from somewhere
Yeah.
else that I'm leaving.
My position in these scenarios when I have someone as a manager or anyone resigning actually is to work through the detail of the exit as rapid as possible and to let everybody know as soon as possible, like
Yeah.
literally as soon, like obviously giving that person a time to tell who they need to tell, one-to-one and so on. And then having a mini announcement, this person will be leaving. And
Depending
frankly,
on the company culture,
yeah,
but yeah.
I mean, this is my personal preference. And frankly, my personal preference is get the news out somehow and have the final detail go out later if needs be. But like, I over rotate on transparency, and I think it just the alternative is a lot of like rumor type situation, which is maybe not as
Yeah. Yeah. And the reason I think we can say we both believe in this transparency is because it allows trust. Like if people know that when somebody is leaving, it's going to be shared immediately or as soon as possible, then they will just stop second guessing who's leaving next week because they can rest assured that they will hear the information. This is why transparency is so powerful, because it takes away this cloud of uncertainty and second guessing and all these aspects that can paralyze someone's thinking.
So briefly, Peter, what happens in a scenario where my manager, I resigned, and my manager comes back to me and says, "Don't tell anyone. I want to think about this," and then they come back a little bit later with an offer. What should I do?
I mean, it all depends on the offer. I wrote in the article that I really don't believe in counter offers, so I'm working hard to find reasons why
It still
it
happens
would
though,
be a
right? So
viable option. It happens.
put it
Yeah,
this
it
way,
happens.
if you ever listen to this and you work for me, I can assure you that it would be
Yeah.
a very, very rare situation that I would give you a counter offer. As I would say, just
Yeah.
accept your resignation. Thank you. Really appreciate your time, and wish you all
Yeah.
the best. And let's have a great offboarding. And how can I help you be successful? But like, okay, but it still happens.
Yeah, it still happens. Yeah, no, you're right. Like in my career, I think there was one counter of. I remember one counter offer. Maybe there was two that I gave, and I can justify them or justify that one that I remember. If you have this, then I think there's not much difference between this and the offer. What I said at the offer. Take some time, like ask for some time. Obviously, don't say anything on the spot. Like, don't refuse the offer unless you feel very strongly about it. I think as a good leader, you don't make rush decisions. So your manager will accept, probably even appreciate that you need at least a day to think about it, to have all the details figured out. Again, have it in writing if you get there, but you don't need to insist on that on the first moment. And then just try to have an objective thinking. It's also true that small red flags and gut feelings, they're not gonna go away. Like if there is something wrong about the company that you don't really like, that's really not gonna go away. In fact, probably gonna be emphasized after you accept the counter offer. It also tells a lot about the company, I think, that in order to get a raise or any kind of recognition that's tangible, you need to quit and present an offer. I know there are companies where this is almost like an advised way of doing it, because otherwise managers are struggling to get the budget, but that's not a culture where I would like to work.
No.
But yeah, maybe someone listening to this would be okay with that.
Yeah, and I'll also say, I mean, it can be a case of timing. Like you're up for a promotion to, I don't know, senior principal, whatever or you're maybe there's a senior manager or whatever or there's something about to happen, and that thing that you really wanted is about to happen in the company, and you just didn't know it, and you're really on the cusp of it. I mean, I would say that you've got to weigh it up, but My thinking is 9 times out of 10, those things don't really work to retain people.
Yeah.
And if you're on the receiving end of it, you know, or are you just using the other job like to negotiate? You just went through a load of interviews, mentally preparing yourself, and
Mm.
did you really do all of that? I mean, but then again, maybe I don't know. So
I mean, I don't think that would be a strong contributing factor in my decision. I think it's more that about about the company culture
yeah,
and what I'm leaving behind. But yeah, let's do a thought experiment. Like, how does a successful counteroffer or tempting counteroffer would look like? I would say it has something concretely changing in one of the aspects at least that made me leave the company. So if to your point, I was working 3-4 years towards a promotion, didn't get that promotion, I would love that in almost like guaranteed in the counter offer that I can get there or even get that
but
promotion.
your point is very important here. It's not just that someone gave you a promotion. Like if you're looking, it's also about the responsibility of that. So like, let's say
Yeah,
the next step for you is a manager of managers, and the offer you have is to be senior, but without a change, the actual change. Even if you get a bump in your salary and a title change, is it really worth it? Like, and it would be very rare that a company would just be able in a position to be able to offer you a more material change, but sometimes there
yeah.
is. So,
Well,
but
not on the
yeah,
spot, but sometimes there is a timeline. Like, it's also how much trust do you have in your manager? What is your
exactly.
relationship? Like, if you have a good relationship, then just like we advised with the recruiter, work together. Like dissipate as a problem, almost like in the negotiating process, and work together. Okay, I really want to be a manager of managers. Do you think it can happen in this company, or I need to leave to for it to
The
make
important
it
point here
happen?
is also this shouldn't be the first time you have the conversation. This shouldn't be a
Yes,
surprise.
yes,
Frankly, if you have a good trust relationship with your manager, your career conversations and everything, you're having proper conversations about your feedback and everything else, you already know the answer to these questions. You will know what's possible, and they will know, oh, I know this person's really on the edge to leave. Maybe I
yeah,
suspect they are interviewing, or whatever. And you might get to the point where it's like you have such a good relationship that they're actually a reference for you, regardless, because they are, you trust them to the point that they are invested in you no matter where you work. Um,
yeah, yeah.
um,
It's never personal. It shouldn't be personal. Like everyone should be just motivated in the success of others. And if that's the case, then yeah, maybe the manager is gonna be the first to congratulate you on the offer.
exactly. Yeah.
The other aspect I think could work for a counteroffer is if there is something external that maybe can put a time on it. Say the company goes through an acquisition, the company launches an important product, and the manager goes to you that I understand this, I respect your decision, I'm bummed. What can I do to make sure that you're still here for the next 6 months to make sure this acquisition goes as a success or product launch goes as a success? And then maybe that can be a reason for you to accept the counter offer. But
Yeah. Yeah. But that
yeah, as you said, 9 out of 10 times it
feels
doesn't
very
work out too
tenuous to
well.
me. Now that okay, but and usually your manager may not know. Well, if it's an acquisition or something like that, and it hasn't been announced, they're not going to tell you. But if you're in a critical role or team and they don't want to risk it, they may throw something at you that would be hard for you to say no to. And or I mean, but anyway, you'll know. You'll
These
know.
are, yeah, you all know. Mm, Just be aware that these are usually short-term considerations. In the long term, you're probably don't have a future at this company because you already demonstrated that you're willing to leave. And
You've gone and said I want to resign.
yeah,
So
exactly. So if there's a layoff, you're gonna be on the top of the list to consider.
yeah, exactly. Anyway, yeah. um, or even worse. And though it seems to me like we're past the peak layoff. Uh, the well, like big companies that are making loads of money that are still laying off people. But I do think of the smaller companies, startups and so on, and scale ups who are running out of runway, we're not hitting peak. I mean, I think we're going to continue to see economic layoffs of businesses that are, you know, having to do that. So I think that the threat of a layoff, you'll know anyway if your organization is
Yeah.
at risk.
The interesting point you make, and gives a good opportunity to announce that we are planning a next podcast episode with a guest, with my co-author Peter Batis, who's an independent recruiter working with tech companies for decades now. Like he used to be working at a partner firm where I was managing director of a company. And so we have a long relationship, and he's very experienced in this climate also. So we're gonna have a discussion with him. And the reason I can connect is that, yeah, let's talk a bit about where are we now, and maybe we should have this talk with him also. The way I see it is close to what Gergely Orosz is explained in a meetup a few weeks ago. Is yes, companies are laying off managers now. They are getting more flat, and they are hiring managers to be hands-on and doubling down on coders and developers. What's going to happen is that they will realize that that person doesn't like to work with this person. That person left a comment on the code that made this other person quit, or somebody needs to manage them. And then this whole thing bounces back, and there's a realization that more managers are needed, or actually the value of a manager is not necessarily in coding. But I think we are still like half a year, 1 year away from that period at least.
Yeah, I think so too.
But anyway, maybe that's something to discuss with Peter. And to the listeners, hope they can join.
Exactly.
That too.
I think it's going to be a fantastic conversation, and really looking forward to having Peter on the show as our second guest.
Second Peter.
Yeah, the second Peter. There can never be enough. And just to wrap out this, talk me through kind of like the final stages of offboarding, and by the way, I think then there's almost like a whole other series at some point around the first 90 days and starting out and so on. But
I'm planning that actually. Yeah, like the onboarding part and how to prepare for that and how to do that. I'm not sure I'm going to start in this summer. Maybe it's going to be later because I'm a bit burnt out of all the hiring advice. But yeah, good point. So offboarding, obviously you cannot take company materials with you. So don't copy the whole code base and all your emails and everything. That most probably against the law wherever you're living, whatever country. But that being said, you still have access to all the company documents. Spend some time figuring out what are the tangible things that I could take a note of or record or write down that can prove my success here or what I achieved at this company. Because those information are going to be critical next time looking for a job. Maybe it's in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, whatever. But now is the time when you still have access to this. The memory is still fresh. So go through the formal feedback cycles. Take. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't know if you can take those documents, but I'm pretty sure you could.
At least to take some handwritten notes or something about
exactly like take the notes, dates, numbers, projects. Those will spark your memory once you see them written. What project you work on? It's crazy how fast people forget these things when they start in a new job. So yeah, just have a list of what were the major projects, who did I manage, what promotions did I achieve as a manager, what did we ship under my leadership, and if you can add the few numbers like I don't know, numbers that metrics you wanted to impact or were monitoring. That I think
I
that's
would
great.
warn and counsel against kind of like whole scale copying of documents, things like that.
No, don't do that.
Don't do that. Don't take copies of people's salary information and database information about people and all of that. It would be horrendous. Please, really don't do that. for me, the offboarding and the number one thing as a manager, when you're offboarding, is to look after the people and have a handover of the people that you manage. And ideally, if there's a successor, what you want to do with your successor is to do a handover meeting one-to-one, and then also with the person. If that there is no successor immediately, there's a backfill hiring or whatever, do it with your manager who's going to take over, like the team. In that scenario, especially, your notes and everything else are even more important. The number one thing that you need to make sure of is that you find a way to transition the kind of promises or the kind of like the things that you were trying to do for people in their growth and career and so on, and pass the baton of those to someone else who you trust to do it, or to give the best chance of that to be passed on within the organization.
Yeah.
And it might be that you have to talk to someone from HR or whatever, but like I think like your priority is definitely, that's number one priority as a manager.
Mhm.
And
That's a
I
good
liked
point.
what you
Yeah.
wrote, write the LinkedIn recommendations. I frankly, right, if you do it, like from my own experience, if I do it if I say I'm going to do it after, I'll never get to it. But if I do it then and there and I put time aside in all of it, it's probably more likely to
Yeah.
happen. And honestly, then if you're doing that, you may have some reciprocal recommendations, which you're probably less likely to get once you're out the door anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, so that the handover, the offboarding, and I don't know, like, what do you think about that? That some companies do an HR exit interview. Like, how transparent should you be
I
about your real reasons in that
th-
interview, Peter?
that's a great question. Like as a manager, seeing people leave, I have mixed feelings about the exit interview. We can talk about that. But as a person leaving, I think you should just cooperate and be totally transparent, and in a way that's constructive to the company. Like there is no reason to, I don't know, double down on problems and grievances and everything, but just look at it as an opportunity to make the life of those who stay behind easier.
Yeah,
What is that you couldn't achieve, you would judge. That being said, I mean, why couldn't you achieve those while you were there? Like, why couldn't you tell them why you were there? It's really, that's why as a manager, I always enjoy the exit interviews. I really like, because people are 99% of people who did exit interviews with me were super honest and constructive and wanted to help. Not much new came out of it for me. Like I knew about those stuff that they
yeah.
were talking
And I
about.
think if you're a manager of someone and you discover new stuff from that, then, or in someone's exit, then you're probably already failed at some aspect.
Yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that's a food for thought. Like why didn't this person feel that it's safe to share these with me while there is still a work related?
Why did I create an environment where it wasn't possible for people to share their, speak up? And yeah, and I think that as a manager of people, of managers, of others, you need to take responsibility for that being your personal failure, as well, because
Yeah,
you've got to take responsibility for you own the system, you know. Um, and
yeah,
I mean, I'm a big fan of Jocko Willink and the extreme ownership book he talks about in
yeah,
leadership, and I think it's another book we should probably put in the show notes for this one. But
yeah,
I think it's an important part. Like, take it as a warning shot when now it could be like a weird and wacky thing, and fine, that's okay, right? Maybe, but if it's something that speaks to the system and how the system works, and it's a surprise, I think that's where maybe you need to, you need to take some responsibility for that too.
Yeah, but still, it's still better that you figure it out too late than not figuring
At
it
least
out at all.
don't have it come back to you from another exit interview later.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah.
now
Take some
address it,
actions.
do something, and yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, um, and
But
yeah,
yeah, I have a bit mixed feelings on exit interviews. I don't think they are as efficient as I thought in the beginning of my career.
no, my take to be honest, like I I don't know, yeah, I think I agree with you that I don't think they make much difference, and um, you could be
Sometimes it
encouraged
gives a
by
good
someone,
closure.
yeah, like I've just seen them abused too much by the company. I've seen them used in interesting angles after the fact when people leave and twisted in different ways. And I
Oh,
don't know
okay,
if the
yeah,
consequences are ever quite what you're hoping they are going to be when you say, I'm doing this or that, and all the rest.
yeah,
And
yeah. Well, it's hard to judge without knowing the specifics of what you mean, but yeah, and also the situation is weird. Like you're either doing the exit interview with your manager, but then why is this the
yeah,
platform
or
you're
you do it
sharing
with
these
HR
thoughts and
person.
not before? Or you do it with an HR person who has almost zero context of your day to day and probably just taking notes of what you're saying. And there's one more thing I wanted to add here on the exit interview is if you're the manager doing the exit interview, resist the temptation of trying to convince the
Don't
person
argue.
that they are wrong.
Yeah,
Don't argue. That's just take notes. And sometimes it's super hard because maybe what they are mentioning is something that you've been working on for months with leadership to change and you failed. And you would just like to resolve this tension between you by sharing this and trying to point out the good things in this. No, they made their decision. This is an exit interview. At whatever they are saying, take notes and be
yeah,
thankful for the opportunity.
yeah, yeah. Just
I
be
talk from
curious.
personal
Yeah,
experience because this is super hard to resist.
exactly.
I usually like to point out the positives to people, which can be annoying, but this is not the setting
Yeah, this is
where it
not the place
happens.
to just be curious, take it, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
be curious is a good way to explain
yeah.
it. Yeah.
I think there's one last bit of all of this, and I think, frankly, this is really about, you talk about ruling out any second thoughts you might have after your choice, accepting that you
Yeah.
had the best decision. And I would say that one of the key bits to this is in what we talked about at the beginning of when you're weighing up the offer and you're doing the negotiation. Um, and you're, any kind of, getting any, I think the way to think about this is if you're in this situation, you're listening to this, you're maybe interviewing or whatever, the sentiment you feel about your company, about why you want to leave, you have to be able to project yourself some years down the road, and you might feel the same about the new job you're just accepting. Because it's just part of the cycle. Sometimes it can be like that, what worked at the beginning may not work now, the environments change, and so on
Yeah.
and so forth. And I think what you want to do as much as possible is to give us as much of a runway for this next job as possible by not leaving little things that will fester, because stuff accumulates over time in a job. And so it is about that, the way that, for me, it's about that negotiation and, the writing and weighing up it all and all the rest, it's, yeah, partly that I think is a big way towards it.
Yeah. Cool. Oh, we can close this topic.
Yeah. Actually, I think you make an important point if you, on this also, if you're disappointed when you start,
Oh yeah, it's just gonna get worse.
yeah, but you say at least give it some time. And I think that's important advice, like, um, yeah, I would just don't, I mean, well, unless you have major red flags in the first few weeks or whatever, and that can happen. But, um,
Mm.
people, maybe you can stick it out a little bit longer and then go back on the market, in case you're it depends financially and, if you're, all the kind of
Yeah, I mean,
things around it, but try to give it some
there's
time.
give it some time. I mean, there's an edge case. If something is horrible, you have the trial period where you can immediately leave. Yeah, I fortunately never had to
Yeah.
exercise that. But yeah, give it some time and be aware of your biases. Like, you're in a new environment. Every little interaction you have, every little new thing, they seem disproportionately bigger than they actually are. Maybe the first thing that you see is the code base of a project, and maybe it looks horrible. Maybe it's full of tech debt and everything. Maybe after 1 month, you realize that this piece of code is on its way out. It's not even used too much in the application anymore. Everybody's aware there's a plan to change it, etc. When that was the first code that you saw without this context, it seemed horrible. It seemed scary. And then 1 month later, it's part of life. And
And
yeah,
frankly,
sure.
you probably would have felt the same about your code base in your previous job anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, but it's just an example.
Yeah,
My
exactly.
point is that every impression that you have will be disproportionately seem bigger than they are. So maybe take a note.
Yeah.
That can help. Like today I learned about this code base. I think it has this, and this problem. I'm curious to figure out what allows the company to leave it like this. I'm curious to figure out what plans they have to address that. I'm curious to figure out what priorities they use to make it that resulted in
Yeah.
this state. And then just keep on having notes. And after 30 days, 60 days, look back at your notes and see, oh, this is still an issue, actually. Let's dig into this. Or you will see that, oh, yeah, I was so naive. I didn't know
Exactly. I didn't
anything there.
understand the whole context. But now we're into the next series, Peter. As in how
What
to
do you-
start a new job.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we're not going to come for a few more weeks. So, on the Lord.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it. I hope it was useful. We're gonna have the extra show on this, the interview with Peter Batis, where we will discuss the series of these
Yeah.
articles, the whole hiring process, and I think it can be useful to discuss the current climate and what can be good strategies and what could be avoided in this time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Stay
Yeah.
tuned.
Well done, Peter.
Thank you. And changing the topic, congratulations for you on your birthday or birth year of your blogging career, as you shared in
20
your
years.
20 years. Amazing.
Yeah.
What?
It's funny. I read an article. I had I had a bunch of different things I could write about. And then I read an article and it was like 20 years of blogging on my own website. And I was like, hang on a minute. Like, when did I start blogging? And I know that like my earlier blog posts are actually in the Wayback Machine, the Internet Archive.
Yeah.
And I found them and I realized that I actually have been also blogging for 20 years. It'll be in August, it'll be 21 years. So I was like, oh, okay. And then I went through I read a lot of it and I wrote a whole article and did kind of a retrospect on why I write. Actually, that's really the most valuable part about the blog post. But I have to say things have changed a lot in the time.
Yeah, let's go into the debate and then maybe I can share also how I feel about this, because I'm also blogging since a long time. Most of my blogging was in Hungarian. I think, yeah, this is my first or second, let's say second blog that I have in English. The first one was when we were working on Kinja, the CMS of Gawker, where I think every good leader should. I was dog fooding our own platform and writing a few posts here and there in English. But yeah, most of my career was Hungarian or a photo blog. So I'm curious what did you see in blogging when you started it? And then how was the climate different then and how is
What did I see? Honestly, so I was a geek. I'd already been before, in school, when I was still at school, I was going into BBSs and, bulletin boards, dial-up modem, connected bulletin board. You're in a kind of a small world. you can like send an email and it goes via dial-up to the eventually into the real internet. And I remember going to university and actually having like like an Ethernet connection in my room, which was like wow. And before that was just like a dial-up, or I think we had ADSL, but not great. Like even even after I graduated, the ADSL connection wasn't so great. But like, why did I blog? I think the internet was this new frontier. It felt like you're going into the Wild West and in a new place and settling it. And part of settling it was finding, choosing your domain or registering a domain and then having this presence and putting stuff up there and writing and it was just like I think that's why I did it, and it was a very geeky enterprise. It wasn't like I'm pretty sure most of the people who read my blogging were like fellow geeks. Yeah, that's why I just
It's interesting what you mentioned about the people who were reading your blog. For me, the motivation was mostly this. Like, remember, there were no social networks. There
yeah,
was
just your
nothing like this.
friends.
Yeah. So that was a way of finding people to connect to, like-minded people, and at least for me, that was part of the motivation. Like to whatever motivates people now or 10 years ago to be active on social networks, to find like-minded people and find some friends.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It really was, and I just was searching now, but because RSS, I think came later. I don't know, like
It was later,
yeah,
yeah, 2000, I would say early 2010s or late
yeah. I just
2000s.
read the spec was 2009 or something like that. So it's like
Yeah. I mean, it was all around the time when everybody thought that HTML is going to be XML, like XHTML,
yeah,
if you remember, and everything was about XML. Like, that was the JSON of the age. Go ahead. Everything was in
yeah.
XML.
As a
And
Java developer, I know all about maybe too much about XML. I had to say, but
uh,
and I yeah, just yeah, just a different age. And actually, this is the really interesting thing that I realized when I look back at it, right? So a lot of my earlier posts were kind of personal and diary journally like,
mm,
and I was putting them out there just for anyone to see. But I mean, it was only I guess friends or whatever. And then and it wasn't like they got an email when I wrote it or anything like that. It was they had to go to
no,
my website.
no, I mean,
Yeah,
that's why RSS was so revolutionary, because you finally didn't have to go through all your bookmarks and check what your friends are doing. You could have their new posts in a feed
that's
reader.
because people like us were blogging, and so there became more and more websites. So suddenly you needed some
Yeah.
technology to be able to
Yeah.
not just check
Exactly.
on my
Yeah.
friend's bookmark once a month or I don't know what. So
Yeah.
um yeah, and
See,
yeah,
I mean, I'm sorry, we're gonna get into a lot of rabbit holes because I'm very nostalgic about it. But this was great about RSS and that it was a machine readable format. So we could do like aggregators. I could have the blogs that I'm following. I could have it on the sidebar of my blog. That by the way, these are the fresh posts from my friends
yeah.
or from
And I think I did
important.
have that, right? So
Yeah, I did have that also.
yeah. Um Yeah, I'm pretty sure I had like here's the sites. And by the way, the sites were like literally my flatmate who was a developer and another really good friend of mine who I went to university with who no, sorry, went to school with and he was he had his own he had access to a server through university that he put a lot of stuff on, and then after he graduated he worked for I think NetApp, and he had a bunch of hardware that he had access to, which was pretty phenomenal.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah.
Ah, yeah. My first workplace was at an ISP, and I remember when I was just downloading something from. We had an FTP server with some friends to share some music, and it was faster to download than to read from a CD that we burned all these MP3s on CD. But like mind blown. The internet faster than my local CD-ROM. That's so cool. And now it's hard to imagine otherwise.
Exactly. It's and this is the thing that I noticed when you go talk about social and all the rest, is I realized that as Facebook, and if I look at my timeline, and this is an interesting thing, like, so as I look back on the timeline, as I look back on it, when Facebook and then Twitter came along, that was really like towards, I had a little hiatus where I was working a lot, and then Facebook and Twitter came along, and that really, I just moved most of my posts and everything there. And Facebook was a really great place at the beginning. It was literally, it was really just my friends, and it wasn't that many people. Then it grew and grew, and
Twitter was awesome.
Twitter was awesome at the beginning. Real conversations and
very open APIs, like without much limitation.
Oh, I
almost
used a different Twitter app than what they, what I did. Yeah.
And yeah, we had all written automatisms that posted from RSS feeds to our followers in Twitter.
Yeah, and I think like the beginning of all of that, like it did solve a lot of the problems I had of like my posting and blogging, which is probably why a lot of the kind of posts I was posting at the time moved over to those platforms. But then those platforms became increasingly toxic. I think like for me, they went through a phase of first not making me feel good because you had people posting. It was kind of like keeping up with the Joneses. Like, is my life a great life if I see this other person? It's been, and then it got taken to another level with influencers now today and how things are today. But the other bit that where I think social media then went like down into the real spiral was kind of the TikTok, pure attention. Like, now every platform has shorts. I mean, I'm not on Instagram. I mean, I have an Instagram account, but I see it, and I had a TikTok account which I deleted immediately after 2 weeks of having TikTok, I deleted it, and I had TikTok at the very, very beginning of TikTok, like when it was brand new, nobody really, it was just starting to be talked about.
Theoretically.
Yeah, and no, it was just after. It was definitely called TikTok, and it's just a horrible place now, but there's so much fantastic potential with all of the technology that we have.
Let me tie this to an elegant move to engineering leadership and actually product leadership. Like the reason why this became so shit and why like Facebook and Instagram and everything became so toxic is because they had the wrong metrics that they wanted to improve.
Yes.
They wanted to improve time spent on the site. That was the metric that they wanted to improve. And if you think about it, like if this is the incentive you as a content creator have, then and the metrics you want to the platform is improving is time spent or engagement, that just amplifies extremist content. That just created this whole genre of rage bait, when somebody is doing something obviously stupid for the reason for you to watch it and be pissed off about it and engage. It's crazy. And all because there was a product decision that this is the metric that we want to improve. So be very careful when you're choosing what metric you want to improve because of all the unintended consequences.
Yeah, there's two threads of thought here. One thought I wanted to just say is like that what other metric could they choose if advertising was their business model?
That's maybe it was inevitable.
Yeah,
maybe it was inevitable. And maybe it's a maturing process because we needed to see this shitty side of what the internet can become to be willingly cashing out $10 here and there for various subscriptions to pay for content creators to get what we really want. The promise of the internet from 1999, from 2000 was that of the web, that it's for free. Everything is for free. You're either fueling some kind of VC that just wants growth and doesn't care about monetization, or you're the product because your attention is what you're paying with, that you spend on advertisements or purchasing what the site offers.
And the thing that was part of the techno optimism that we had freeware and open source, and we were trying to give stuff away, and so
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah. I totally remember. But my point is that maybe this was necessary. I mean, go back in time now when you started your blog, early 2000s. If a company comes saying, "Oh, hey Jeremy, please pay me, I don't know, $10 a month, and you can read my articles, or you can use my email client, or whatever," you, what the hell would I do that? Uh,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe it's a maturing process.
So then the other
And,
thing about
and
this whole feeding the algorithm and the negative content feeds, it's really interesting from a couple angles. I remember at one stage, a friend of mine was saying like how to do well on getting a lot of followers on Twitter is to basically get into a lot of arguments on Twitter. And it's interesting also looking at some of the, I hit the front page of Hacker News a couple of times. And one is kind of a controversial. I wrote like Kubernetes is a red flag
yeah,
signaling premature optimization. Um,
you had a very good clickbaity title also.
it worked
I
well for
remember
that
that
audience.
worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, and I've seen like, I've seen that creating that controversy is definitely a way to kind of short circuit a lot of it. Now, I think maybe I'm getting old now, but I'm trying to move away from that. I don't want that. I don't want to live in a world where that is. I'm trying to have a rule for myself. There's so many opportunities where I see stuff on LinkedIn where I could put in a snide comment or whatever. And my rule is now, like, if it's in public, fine, over a beer, you'll hear me say stuff. And friends of mine know, though, I love to throw in controversial comments. But in the online world now, I think I'm trying to stick to, if I don't have something positive to say, I won't say it. I'm really trying hard to just only in sort of
Yeah, that's interesting.
like on publicly and online. If you debate politics with me, you'll know I'll throw crazy stuff at you. But yeah,
No, but that's interesting because I agree with the principle, but I'm admitting that I'm falling prey to it. Like last week, I think I was pissed off because I read this article about Dell forcing their employees to go back to the office in a way that not obligatory, but then they are not allowed to get any kind of promotions or anything. And what triggered me was that they installing some kind of monitoring system that confirms that these people are actually in the office. So I wrote a very snarky post on LinkedIn about how about this whole thing. I don't want to get into details, but yeah, to your point, I didn't add anything positive to the platform that they just
but
fuel to rage.
I'm curious about this is a good segue to your LinkedIn experiments of like posting times and posting. You've been posting quite regularly, and I'm curious, like,
Yeah,
for example, that post, where you was something controversial, maybe a lot of people.
yeah. I
How did
the
it do?
experiment is smaller. I didn't look at the numbers yet, but the experiment I did 2 or 3 weeks ago was about I took one of my blog posts, the craft conference takeaways, and I scheduled each takeaway for a different day. And they had some various content, like some had an image, some didn't, some tagged the author of the talk, the speaker, some didn't. And I didn't look at the numbers yet, but based on what my gut feeling is that there were some that got very viral because the speaker who I tagged in reacted to it.
And
And
reposted, yeah.
usually they do, like they say a like or they say a thank you or something.
The LinkedIn
And
algorithm will
that
penalize you if you tag someone and they don't respond to the post. Like, it will
Oh, I didn't
directly
know that.
penalize it. Yeah.
I saw the impact of the other way around, because that immediately put my post to their followers' feeds,
Yeah. If they
and
repost
I
you,
reached a lot of it.
boom. Yeah. You have more engagement.
Oh yeah, reposting, yeah. But even without reposting, like if I follow you and you like something, that can come up in my feed.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, if you're talking about history, you remember when this was radical, that you went on a social network and you saw content that was not from your followers.
Yeah.
I remember when Instagram did this, one of the first, and there was a big uproar, and they had to bring in a setting somewhere that only show me content from my
Well,
from
that
people I
was a turning
follow.
point for when Twitter got
Yeah.
really bad, right? Was when
Oh
Twitter
yeah.
changed the sequence of the timeline to be out of sequence
That was the other thing.
of
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and they started then prioritizing things. And I think in the Facebook timeline, what destroyed the Facebook timeline was the kind of the people sharing links to articles and stuff. Like it became so much worse when it was not just like little text updates and photos and things, right?
Yeah, I think it's so. I'm sticking to this opinion I had that it's all about metrics they choose that they want to improve and optimize, and especially if you add AI to the equation, you have an algorithm that has some parts of machine learning in it and some AI predictions that will, especially in TikTok, I think that's how it works. That it's not, but probably all the social networks, YouTube, everything, it's not a fine-tuned exact algorithm. There's a lot of AI prediction in it, based on your previous history, what you're even looking at, how much time you're spending
That's
on
what people
content.
say. TikTok's really good because it very quickly knows what I like and
Yes,
then it feeds me
yes,
that, right?
yes. So I guess this is natural that this kind of extremist and divisive content is coming up because that's the kind of content people spend a lot of time on,
I
and they
wish that
argue with it.
LinkedIn could figure out, make something work for their feed because
There's
it's
huge responsibility on them, I think.
LinkedIn is just feels like rubbish. I honestly, it's like the only social platform left where there can be something, and like I see a lot of people have moved to it, like who used to be on Twitter or whatever, but not it's not there yet for me, you know.
And Twitter has its own problems, I think.
Oh
There are a lot of made for Twitter posts that you can recognize the
yeah,
patterns with the AI illustration and everything.
yeah.
But yeah, it's still better. But I'm optimistic. Something will come up, and especially with all the Fediverse and everything. Maybe there's a time when we can get away from big centralized platforms and build up
I
something
am really hopeful
very
for the
distributed.
Fediverse. I'm really hopeful for the Fediverse and that we can get a feeling back to where we were on that.
Yeah, or something more resembling that, because I don't think it's possible to go back in time,
Or
but
islands. We should be going forward in time in a more positive way. But learn. You said it
yeah,
right earlier. We can learn from where it went wrong, the wrong incentives. You know.
yeah, yeah, and incentivize different things. Now we are mature enough to connect to another earlier points that asking for money is not a taboo anymore. Advertising is not the only way to monetize something. So a lot of things are aligning, and there are a lot of people pissed off of the current state of social media,
Yeah.
and arguably it has a very tangibly bad impact on our societies also. If you look at all the election
Yeah.
results and everything, that's the result of people being exposed to unverified extremist content. And
Yeah. I mean, if you like, this is really what's amazing about the scale of just sometimes I get totally blown away by the scale of the number of people on the planet and what's possible, but and how the internet enables us to connect. But like, if you have 1,000 followers that pay you $10 a month, you can be in a very good place.
oh yeah, in some parts of the world that can easily feed a family and have
Wait a
some
minute.
assistance and
Let's just,
everything.
10 times
Yeah,
12
okay, that's 120. That's
times
everywhere.
times 1,000 is 120,000, right?
Yeah,
It's that.
we're talking about somebody who can pay someone for editing, who can pay someone for social media assistant, whatever, some a designer, some.
Yeah,
That's a
you
small.
might cut into that, but then again, if you're hitting 1,000 people paying you that, I think the next 1,000 is achievable, because there's just the scale of it. So, um, I just love the fact that we are in, we're moving beyond, and I mean that's why I'm bullish on things like Ghost and the Fediverse and so on. And I mean, obviously Substack too, but like I think Substack is still a platform, and I think platforms tend to go bad at some point. So we'll just see when it goes bad. Some would argue Substack is already bad because of the content they allow on it, and so but
or all the way they are pushing for subscribers is not the best user experience.
they shove a lot of
No.
recommendations down your throat. Like there's a lot of
Yeah,
dark
exactly.
patterns.
And
Like
they make it seem like you need to subscribe in order to read the article when you actually don't necessarily.
yeah, I think the dark patterns are getting a bit too much. But I mean, I consume it via RSS, so I don't have that problem.
I don't see that, yeah. No, what I wanted to say is that I don't want to crucify platforms. Like, I think big centralized platforms have the luxury of having funds to put behind an idea and accept if it's not profitable immediately. All these distributed ideas they have a lot of problem to solve to get to near the scale of what Substack is already operating.
Yeah. Well, awesome. Have you any
Wow,
idea what you're
that
going
was
to write about this week, Peter?
I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to write about anything this week because I'm going to be biking. Actually, starting tomorrow morning. Every year I try to take a week or two separately for some cycling, and this year it's going to be this week. So I try to prepare my Friday newsletter today as much as I can, and
We'll follow you on Strava.
yeah,
Maybe
you
your
can.
Friday newsletter should just be your Strava rides, and some pictures.
You know what? I'm struggling with how much personal content I should put in my newsletter because at the end of the day, this is an engineering leadership blog. People might not have signed up for that. I separated the Friday updates with the more in theme articles, but still sometimes I. But from the last one, which was also it had a lot of cycling content with this game I launched a new website about, and everything somebody wrote back that they really enjoyed
I really enjoy it.
this
Maybe
issue.
because I know
Thank you,
you,
Jeremy.
but
Yeah. But what felt really good is that I only met this person once through some donut introduction. He's an engineering manager, and even on the chat, he was saying that he really likes this personal aspect, and so that's good feedback.
me too. And for those who don't know, Peter made a website last week, and it's called whatistiling.com, right? Highly recommend
Okay,
it.
the name is catchy enough
Yeah.
that you remember.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. And the website is awesome, and it explains Peter's passion, and highly recommend it. And basically, I went to the website, didn't even get, it felt like a sales pitch for tiling. So I think I got halfway. Then I signed up for Squadrats. So if you were selling something, I would have bought it.
Maybe I should put an affiliate link. There is no money I make from it. Actually, I needed to pay for the domain name.
Yeah, but yes, I signed up for Squadrats, and
Cool.
and now I realize, like, if I was like, if I still lived in Paris, I have actually a 6x6 square, and I could have gotten a way bigger square just by filling a few on the edges.
Because the game is about, well, check out whatistiling.com. I'm not going to explain, but it's about going to area where you wouldn't go normally.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm gonna just put it in the, so if we make sure we put it in the show note. But well, Peter,
Cool.
I think that's us for this week. We said 1 hour. We're at 1 hour 40 minutes. We might have to chop out some bits. I don't know, but this has really been great. And obviously next week we have Peter Batiz. We're going to be talking more about the wider environment and maybe digging into some of the topics in here. Certainly, I think that it's worth going back to, the screening element, especially in what recruiters like. Pulling the kimono, looking behind the kimono of like, what is the recruiter side? What is their view of like the system?
Yeah, I'm super interested in because Peter is an independent person, so he has a lot of company connections and personal connections also of tech experts. Like, how does he see an applicant? What? Yeah. I think he can give some good context.
Yeah. So stay tuned.
That's next.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And thanks for everyone for following. I hope you liked it and found it as much fun as, or at least half as fun as we had. If you want to get notified the next time we publish, please subscribe to our channel in either your favorite podcast app or YouTube. This helps a lot by feeding the algorithm that we were talking about,
The
and helps us get in front
algorithm.
of them. Yeah, the capital A. And yeah, but yeah, it helps us by giving visibility to the show, so we can easier find those people who can similarly get something from it. But
And,
thanks again.
give us feedback. Tell us you hate it, or you
Yeah,
love it,
yeah,
or how we can get better. Yeah.
and see you next.
Have a great week.